Why is Third Declension the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of Latin? Well, because there's 4 of them. But don't worry, they all work together as a team, just like the true turtles. And I, like Master Splinter, will teach you the tricks you need to master Third Declension in just a few minutes. Salve omnes, I'm Jordan Kay, a Latin tutor, teacher, and medalist with a mission to make Latin fun, because I believe it really is. Now, before we dive into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles declension, or Third Declension, I'm going to assume that you've worked with nouns somewhat already and know how to use first and second. If you don't, I have 2 videos here that can walk you through nouns in general, how to use first declension, and how to use second declension. But for this video, I'm going to assume you know these 3 things. You already know how to label all 3 parts of your noun, how to tell which declension a noun belongs to, and how to find your noun's stem. If you know how to do those 3 things, you are totally ready to dive into Third Declension. Now, if you're not a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or don't know who they are, don't worry, this video is just a walkthrough of how Third Declension works, but I will be using the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because I think it makes it a bit more fun. But you'll be able to understand regardless if you're familiar with the franchise. Now, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are famously a group of 4, and Third Declension also comes in 4 pieces. Now you may be thinking, why? First Declension was nice, only 1 box. Second Declension was odd. It had the masculine, feminine, and the neuter, but we learned why. We learned that neuter nouns have dietary restrictions that they must follow, and therefore they can't always share endings. That makes sense. But 4 is completely unreasonable. And I would agree. I actually think most of the Romans agreed with you too, because as you move on to 4th and 5th declension, you never see more than 2 varieties ever again. But Third Declension is also the most versatile, and because it chooses to break the rules a bit, just like the turtles, they're able to do things that other normal people aren't able to do. So let's go ahead and jump into the first Third Declension box, and once we start getting started, I think you'll see what I mean. Let's start with Third Declension Masculine Feminine, or as I like to call it, Leonardo, our leader in blue of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Just like Leo tries his best to lead the turtles in the right direction, Third Declension Masculine Feminine does its best to give the pattern or the orders that all other versions of Third Declension will follow. But when Leo gives orders to the turtles, each one of the turtles might go about it a bit differently depending on their personality. The Third Declension variants are the same way. We don't just have 4 copies of this declension. That would be a waste of space. Instead, each one is a little bit different based off of its personality, but in general, they will look very similar to the original set of orders. Speaking of, as we look at this set of orders, you might notice there's something missing. The nominative singular ending is blank. What? Now, depending on your curriculum, they might have a couple different symbols in here to display that there is, in fact, no nominative singular ending in Third Declension Masculine Feminine, which is wild. How on earth are we supposed to make a Third Declension word the subject of the sentence if there's no nominative singular ending for it? Well, this little quirk of Third Declensions is part of what makes it the most versatile and useful declension you will learn. I would actually go out and say that you're likely going to see Third Declension more than first and second combined. That's because of this useful trick. For example, let's say that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had to travel back in time to Rome. I guess the Krang are getting crazy here. And they're trying to explain who they are in Latin. So Leo is trying to say, I am Leonardo. But how would he say Leonardo in Latin? Right now, you know first and second declension, and first declension words end in A, like Leia and Yoda. And second declension words end in us, like Lucas. So Leo would have to change his name to either Leonarda or Leonardus, and neither of those are his name. And as you go on to learn fourth and fifth declension, they have very specific nominative singular endings as well, none of which would match Leonardo. So if he wants to speak Latin, does he have to change his name? No, thanks to third declension. Because third declension lets you choose your nominative singular form depending on the word. So let's look at our vocabulary word for Leonardo, which is Leonardo, Leonardis, masculine. Remember, our vocab words show us the nominative singular form and the genitive singular form, which is super useful for third declension. Now I see that when I'm declining Leonardo, Leonardo is the full nominative singular form. But that will be different for each third declension word. For example, April can't use first or second declension either. Aprila, Aprilus, no, she's just April. So we're going to go ahead and make her a third declension word as well. April, Aprilis, feminine. She can use these endings as well, but when it is the nominative singular, when it is the subject of the sentence, she can use her name how it is traditionally pronounced, April. So all of these words on the screen are third declension words. And if you look at the nominative singular, you'll see there's quite the variety of different endings. But the genitive singulars are all the same. And that's how we know that they belong to this declension. I often wonder why the Romans left the nominative singular square blank, and I think it's for this very same reason. As they met different people from different countries and picked up new words from other cultures, I have to think that they wanted a way to transform any word into a Latin word, while still keeping, at least in part, the way it traditionally sounded, especially when it comes to names. So because of third declension, you can take any name, give it its own custom nominative singular, and then still have a way to drop the genitive singular and give it a classic stem, so you can use all the other endings in the third declension masculine-feminine box. Let's practice with the sentence, and I think you'll realize it's not as scary as it looks. Let's try to make the sentence, Leonardo sees April. In this sentence, Leonardo is the one doing the verb. He's the one doing the seeing. That makes him my subject or my nominative. And since there's only one Leo, I'm going to use my nominative singular, which leads me to that big blank box. But I like to think of this big blank box as an arrow that's pointing me back to my nominative singular form of the vocab word. So I'll go ahead and pull out that note card and remind myself that Leonardo is the nominative singular form of Leonardo, Leonardis. So I'll write down Leonardo for my sentence. Now Leonardo sees April. April is being seen. She's being verbed. That makes her my direct object or my accusative. And since he's only seeing one April, that's going to be accusative singular, my ending em. To get April's stem, I'm going to drop the genitive singular ending to get my stem, April, and then add the accusative singular ending em to get Leonardo, Aprilem, Widet. Leonardo sees April. Now, here's a problem for you to try on your own. Using these two vocabulary words, can you figure out how to swap the sentence? How would you write April sees Leo? Well, in that sentence, April is the one doing the verb. She's the one doing the seeing. That makes her my nominative. And since there's only one April, I'm going to use the nominative singular ending. That points me back to the original vocab word. And when I look at the vocabulary word, April, Aprilis, feminine, I grab that nominative singular form, April, and put it in the sentence. Now I need to find the right form of Leonardo. April sees Leonardo. Leonardo is being seen. He's being verbed. That makes him my accusative. And since she's only seeing one Leo, that is the accusative singular. That ending is em. So I'm going to take Leonardo's stem, Leonard, and then add the proper ending. And there we have it. April Leonardem Widet. So even though that blank box can be a bit scary, it really is just preaching the same thing that I like to repeat over and over. Memorize all three parts of your vocabulary word. because if you know your words inside and out, third declension isn't scary, it's actually super useful. 1 down and 3 more to go. Let's dive into Raphael's declension, third declension masculine feminine I stem. Third declension masculine feminine I stem is definitely a little bit of a rebel, just like Raphael. Now you might be wondering, what does I stem mean? Well, if you are working with I stems, you've probably seen some vocabulary words that look like this, where they have their 2 parts, their gender, and then the letter I? You're probably thinking, is this some weird 4th gender? No, it's not. I is like a special badge that says, I belong to the I STEM club. And I think this is Raphael's secret club, because he doesn't want to look just like the other turtles. He has to be a little bit rebellious, a little bit different. So he starts the I STEM club that takes Leo's original instructions from third declension, masculine, feminine, and changes them to be this. Did you even see it? Yep, it's only one small change. In the genitive plural, we switch it from to with an I. That's literally the only change from third declension masculine feminine to third declension masculine feminine I stem. But it's an easy one to trip up on, especially if you're translating from English to Latin. The good news is most times your vocabulary words are marked with this I that lets you know, hey, if I'm ever in the genitive plural, which is very oddly specific, make sure to put an I before the genitive plural ending. Besides that, I work totally normally and no differently than the other words you just learned. Now I have 2 quick caveats. 1, if your book is actually giving you the word hostis as a vocabulary word, it might not be marked as masculine for you. It can be marked as masculine, masculine/feminine, or C for common. Common means that the gender of the word changes depending on who you're referring to. If Jafar is your enemy, then that would be hostis in the masculine sense. And if Cinderella's evil stepmother is your enemy, then that would be hostis in the feminine sense. Now, that's not going to make a difference to us right now because both masculine and feminine use the same set of endings, but just something to keep in your head for the future. Second caveat, your curriculum might not actually mark which words are I stem. Some curriculums prefer to teach a trick or a tip so that you can look at words and figure out if they're I stem all on your own. I didn't grow up learning those tips and tricks. Instead, I just memorized which words were which. And in my opinion, that's a more consistent way to know, as tips and tricks rarely work 100% of the time. However, if your book goes that route, please refer to your curriculum to see how they want you to know which words are I stem or plain masculine feminine. And there you have it. Since that's the only change, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our third variant of third declension neuter. If you've worked with any neuter declensions before, third declension neuter shouldn't come as a surprise. It's going to follow the same neuter dietary restrictions that all the other neuter declensions do, while trying its best to look like the masculine feminine form. That's why I call third declension neuter Donatello, because he wants to follow Leonardo's instructions to the best of his ability. But since he's always the one working with the machines or creating new gadgets, he might have an extra set of rules or an extra set of dietary restrictions that he needs to follow in order to make sure Leo's plan works with his device. So let's look at Donatello's device, third declension neuter. It takes Leonardo's original plan and then follows the neuter law. Do you still have your notes from last time? Let's go ahead and pull it up. The neuter law states that the nominative and the accusative in a neuter declension must match. And in the plural, those endings must end in A. Now you may be wondering, how can the nominative and the accusative match if there is no nominative singular? Easy. Make it so there's no accusative singular either. Then go ahead and empty out that box. And now you're just going to use the same nominative singular form as your accusative singular form. Simple as that. Then for the plural, they go for the classic route of just erasing the endings and replacing them with A. And there you have it, your third declension neuter. Hopefully by this point you're starting to see why all you need to memorize at first is Leonardo's instructions. After that, you just need to know the few exceptions that help you create all the other forms. Let's go ahead and practice a little bit with some of these neuter words with Donatello. I'm going to give it to you in Latin this time, and I want you to try translating it into English. You may want to pause the video to give yourselves a few minutes. I'll put all the vocabulary on the side. You're going to need to use both third declension masculine feminine and third declension neuter to translate this sentence. All right, ready for the answer? Let's go ahead and look at Donatello first. What ending is Donatello using? Kind of a trick question because there is no O in our whole third declension masculine feminine box. So it has to be using that blank space, our nominative singular. And we can check that by looking at the vocab word and making sure Donatello matches that word in the nominative singular form, Donatello, Donatellis. Since it matches, this is for sure our nominative singular or subject of the sentence. So I'll go ahead and write that down in English. The subject is always the one verbing, so I'll go ahead and write the verb next. Donatello crossed. I'm just giving you the verb right now, but I do have a video on my channel that explains how verbs work. Next up, let's look at flumen. Looking at my vocabulary list, I see that flumen, fluminous is a neuter noun. So I'm going to need to look at my third declension neuter endings for this one. Which ending is flumen using? Well, we have two options, because N is not an ending seen, so this has to be using one of our blank spaces, either nominative singular or accusative singular. How do we know which one? Is the river the subject doing the verb, or the accusative being verbed? This happens a lot in Latin, where certain endings can be translated multiple ways. But in this case, it's easy to know which one's which, because Donatello only has one option. He has to be our subject, so we already know who's doing the verb. That means that flumen or river can't also be the subject, so we can go ahead and cross that out. It has to be the direct object, the one being crossed, and that also makes a lot of sense. Donatello crossed the river. I'm going to go ahead and just drop down our preposition because prepositions are that simple. Cum means with, so I'll just drop with down in the sentence. Now we just have our last word, Michelangelo. Michelangelo comes from Michelangelo, Michelangelis. What ending is Michelangelo using? Well, it's classic Mikey. He's the only one using a normal ending. As we look through third declension masculine feminine, that short E is our ablative singular. So that means Michelangelo is our object of the preposition. So that means that Donatello crossed the river with Michelangelo. And there you have it. You only have one third declension variant left. Let's go ahead and dive into third declension neuter I stem, or as I like to call it, the Michelangelo declension. Why is third declension neuter I stem the Michelangelo declension? Well, because I think whoever created this one wasn't fully listening. They heard a little bit of Leonardo's original plan, but then they heard that Raphael had a secret club and they definitely want to be a part of that. And then they heard that Donnie has his own special version that has 2 blank spots instead of just 1, and he definitely wants to jump in on that action. So Mikey tries to combine all 3 into a very interesting, thankfully not very commonly used declension, third declension neuter I stem. Here's how I think he got there. He starts with Leonardo's original plan, third declension masculine feminine. Then he heard that Donatello was using those cool neuter law rules, and he wanted to get those in as well. So he does. He makes sure the nominative and accusative match, and in the plural, he switches it to A. Then he hears that Raphael has a cool secret club called the I stem, and then he doesn't hear any more. He just says, I stem, that must mean that every single ending starts with an I, right? Boom! And then he just fills his with I's. He didn't even listen to what Raphael's secret plan was really about. It's like he just tried to come up with what he thinks the I stem probably meant. And you end up with this interesting declension. Third declension neuter I stem. But also, it's not that crazy. You can see how we got there as a combination of the other three options. If a word is marked as neuter and has a little I, then you know that it uses this special set of endings. Cowabunga and booyakasha, you just mastered all 4 variants of third declension. Third declension masculine feminine I stem, neuter, and neuter I stem. But I realize that's a lot to learn all at once. So focus on memorizing Leo's original plan first. Then it's a lot easier to memorize how each turtle makes it unique to them. If you're ready to start that process now, go ahead and dive into my custom worksheets in the description below. You better believe it's TMNT themed and includes a full fandom vocabulary list, so you can use it no matter what curriculum you're used to. And if you're looking for more Latin help with a fandom twist, check out the rest of my Latin Made Fun channel. I'll see you there. Valete omnes!